Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times, joined by my pal, Cameron Drummond from the Indiana Daily Student, coming to you from the Breslin Center, which over the last 2 decades plus has been an absolute house of horrors for Indiana basketball. Place, one of the most unlikeliest places you'll find an Indiana win away from Bloomington, that in the Kohl Center, but that was not the case tonight. A 79-75 Indiana win over Michigan State in overtime over the 6th-ranked Michigan State Spartans. Again, an extremely unlikely scenario just a few hours ago coming into this building, and yet with a total team effort, as cliche as that sounds, but it's exactly what it was in a game where Indiana lost Juwan Morgan, had Rob Finney on the bench during stretches of foul trouble, had Al Durham playing at far less than 100% with an apparent hand injury. It was an absolute team effort, and Indiana was rewarded with a much-needed victory, snapping a 7-game losing streak. I don't know where to begin.
I don't think any of us do, really.
I don't know where to begin. Again, very few people, if anyone saw this coming, given the way Indiana played recently. But they started well and sustained that level virtually throughout the game. Even during some of the offensive lulls that this team is prone to, it was locked in defensively. So what you saw in recent games, with some of the long runs that Michigan and Rutgers were able to author in the middle of those contests, Indiana avoided those major elongated runs tonight.
You didn't see crowd momentum change at all in the game too, because I think runs, but you never really saw obviously the 17-0 run from Michigan, the God forbid the 22-0 run at Rutgers. You saw IU use the 3-point ball pretty effectively in terms of being able to contain that tonight, and it wasn't even your usual shooters making those 3-pointers either. You had Rob Finney finish the game with literally 0 points and 0 assists, and forget Indiana being unlikely to win because of confidence, unlikely to win because of Juwan Morgan going out with 6 minutes left in the first half. The fact that Rob Finney gave you 2 rebounds and that was it tonight is kind of staggering that Indiana was able to overcome that. You had Evan Fitzner made a 3-pointer for the first time in 9 games, I think.
December 19th. Yeah.
Since with Central Arkansas, I guess.
Yes.
And then you had Devontae Green come back from suspension tonight. You had the Jekyll and Hyde Devontae Green again, a bit erratic at times, had a really costly turnover towards the end of regulation that, maybe if that doesn't happen, Indiana's not even playing in overtime and they have a regulation win over the Spartans. But still, he went 3 or 4 from 3-point range, so that kind of, proved his worth back in the lineup. Al Durham had 3-pointers as well. It was a really solid all-around game from a ton of players, and Indiana literally used a ton of players tonight. The depth that this team has kind of been chastised for not having during the losing streak and even during some of the better moments, just winning games in non-conference play when depth was thought to be an issue. That came out in a good way tonight. You had 28 bench points, most in a while. I think most since the tail end of non-conference play as well for the Hoosiers. You had guys like Deron Davis going 25 minutes. We didn't even think Deron Davis was probably going to play tonight.
No. Well, yeah, he came in. He had missed the last 3. But you're right about the bench. I mean, I think the last 2 games combined against Rutgers and Michigan, Indiana had 10 points from its bench, had 10 in the first half tonight. And so when we talk about an engaged effort, it was not only from the 5 that started it, but again, everybody. And that's exactly what it had to be when you lose Juwan Morgan with 6 minutes left in the first half. No real update on Juwan Morgan. I think
it was left shoulder.
Left shoulder, same shoulder he injured as a freshman. Just speculating, but things seem to be at least encouraging there.
He came back to the bench still in uniform in the second half, kind of. I think Deron Davis mentioned post-game he was giving instructions on the bench, yelling out where the defense is, yelling out to post players like Deron, like Jake Forster, what to do on offense. But, I mean, if he's coming back with no material wrapped around that shoulder after Archie Miller said he was being examined during the second half, you can hope for some positive signs in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Indiana finishes with 21 assists on 21 made baskets. It's the kind of movement, the kind of display of offensive patience and purpose, I think, that had largely been lacking, if not just the last 7-game stretch, but really for much of the season, really. But now you're looking at a situation where not only is your losing streak over, but your road-heavy start to Big Ten play is over. 6 of the final 9 games of the season are now going to be played in Bloomington. You kind of thought, all right, maybe this team comes up here and just weathers it, maybe just get out of here healthy at Michigan State, but they do
the opposite. I mean, you take some hits with Juwan Morgan, but there was a good chance this could have been the bottoming out of all bottoming outs for Indiana this season, especially when you kind of stack the Michigan game on top of the Rutgers game, on top of the idea of going to a place you haven't won at since February 2013. And, I mean, literally, aside from the Juwan Morgan injury, this is as good as Indiana could hope for.
Well, now they have the best. They have the best win by a Big Ten team in conference play.
Oh, for sure.
Coming here for being the number 6 team is obviously it's the best win in conference play by a Big Ten team. It suddenly puts your season, if not back on track, right there in position where Indiana can start to get rolling a little bit here. It was funny. I asked Deron Davis after the game, you know, is this a relief just getting this one win, or do they feel like they still have room? They still feel like they have a lot of they still have to dig out of the hole they created, and I think he leaned more toward the latter, just saying that, you know, this is a good one obviously, but there's a lot more work to do, and he was very defiant too of this 7-game stretch, and saying that, you know, it torpedoed the reputation. Coaches don't respect us, teams don't respect us, quoting Deron Davis, and they, according to Deron Davis, they would like to use this as a springboard into the second half of Big Ten play. Archie Miller even used those terms, not the respect part, but looking at this in the frame of, you know, now you have a 10-game season down the stretch here. You know,
we have a 9-game season now.
Right, but coming into this was the final 10 games. You're in a new month. You can wipe January away, and I think really what today did, if nothing else, maybe start to rejuvenate some confidence with this group, because not only with the shooting, but also again, you get a guy like Devontae Green going a little bit. You get Al Durham playing. Al Durham, I think right now, is asserting himself as. He's not going to get a lot of all-conference recognition right now, and he shouldn't. But he's at that level right now where he's becoming a very solid role player, where you know what you're going to get out of Al Durham pretty much night in, night out. Throughout this losing streak, you saw a player who's pretty steady, pretty gritty, pretty aggressive, giving you the kind of energy and jolt that you needed. Did it again tonight.
Just as a sophomore as well, even in the losing efforts, he was the one during the Michigan game trying to be more vocal. You know, he was almost the guy looking like the senior on the court at times, you know, yelling, you know, trying to pump up his teammates, you know, the guy, you know, motioning guys to the huddle, trying to be active in that role. I think tonight was also important for the fact that because Indiana went so far into its bench, you have guys like Demezy Anderson and Jake Forster who played legitimate minutes in a game in the Breslin Center, and for the most part fared well. I mean, you know, there's been knocks on Anderson this season being kind of like a defensive liability at times. You know, the 3-and-D thing hasn't entirely worked out, but he was pretty serviceable tonight. I thought Jake Forster had a really clean game tonight, despite fouling out. I mean, that's kind of what his purpose was there, right? You know, to provide minutes, provide some kind of energy. He dunked, you know, had one of those kind of, you know, highlight reel creating, momentum creating moments for Indiana. They just went so far into their team tonight, and the fact that it's February, they have a win at Michigan State, there's 9 games left, and as you talked about, there's a lot softer kind of road to tread the rest of the season, just because 6 of the 9 remaining games are at home. They're definitely not quite at, you know, the level of competition that Indiana faced, and also literally just being in Bloomington is going to help this team a ton, because even at its worst, this was a team this season that was able to gut out home wins, kind of the results against Nebraska and Michigan aside. And, I mean, you look at the road games that are left for this team, too. It's at Minnesota, at Illinois, which is very winnable, and then I'm blanking on this one. Iowa. At Iowa.
Yeah. I mean, one win is not going to wipe away the sins that a month created. I mean, this is still a team that has to prove it can win on its home floor. I mean, basically going in there and no showing against Nebraska and Michigan. It still has to prove that it has some swagger back at home. It still has to prove it can take advantage of a win like this, take advantage of a home court environment that'll be provided next week against Iowa on Thursday night.
Well, the idea of having stabilizing wins too, like not to have the incredibly low points and the incredibly high points like a roller coaster. That's the wrong hand. Low points, high points. You want it to kind of, you know, balance out. And games like Iowa at home, games like Ohio State at home are going to be, you know, the real litmus test for the team to figure out, all right, are we going to have, you know, the Jekyll and Hyde 2016 team that, you know, can beat, you know, Kansas, North Carolina, but also have embarrassing home losses? Or is this a team that's kind of steadied the ship, can secure itself back into the NCAA tournament? They're probably just right back on the right side of the tournament bubble after this win. But, I mean, you lose 6 of your next 9, then that's out the window already.
Right. I mean, there's still, I mean, it still has to stabilize its shooting. I mean, one huge win, got everything it needed. I mean, the 3 previous losses Michigan State had, it yielded 10 3-pointers in each of those games. They were 12 to Purdue. But
that's a great stat right there.
10 was the magic number, and I didn't even think it was relevant to this team given its woes. It was a ties the season high. I mean, they had 10 against UC Davis. Really haven't come close to that in recent games. I think they had no more than 6 in the last 5 games. No more than 6 in a game in the last 5 games. But 10 was the magic number. They hit it. I don't think that's going to be a thing you can expect every night. But
free throw shooting was solid as well. That's kind of been something that's gotten a little bit better, especially from Romeo Langford this season. Deron Davis hit some big free throws down the stretch as well. I think it's kind of, in terms of this game, Michigan State's inability to do that. I think Nick Ward went 1 for 9, especially in some key free throws down the stretch in the second half and in overtime as well. So, I mean, for a young team as well, Indiana kind of held their nerve as well as you probably could have expected, especially given the in-game circumstances kind of thrown their way tonight.
Reports of Indiana's demise have now been shut down. Team's not dead yet. It still has to prove that this is not only a fluke, but also, again, I don't think they're going to recreate these shooting numbers, more often than not. But what they can create is some of the movement those shots were created from, and I think even then, you can get some good things. I mean, I was a little surprised. I thought Romeo Langford had a lot of open lanes to the basket, especially early in this game, which was surprising given the way teams have played Indiana so often over the last month. Again, there's a lot of things. There's so much dust raining down us right now. I am struggling to talk.
Feels like we're at the bottom of like a Swiffer vacuum or something.
They're cleaning this arena.
Well, we made it messy, so they should probably clean it after.
Again, it's a wonder how much of this stuff will actually, translate down the stretch here. But again,
are you talking about the dust or the shooting?
A lot of things. They out-rebounded Michigan State.
That was a huge surprise to me. The 48-40 rebounding advantage Indiana had in this game, for the fact that Michigan State had size on them, had experience on them. I mean, and that was an advantage Indiana didn't just pop up with in the second half or in overtime either. This was maintained at a very steady pace throughout the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was impressive and unlikely.
Very, for both.
A much-needed win, both in terms of Indiana's season trajectory and the confidence of the players within. Interesting night of basketball here.
Really unexpected. I mean, it's the you never know what sport's going to bring you, Mike. In this case, it's bringing us a lot of dust.
It's very dusty. They're cleaning the arena.
There's got to be a better way. Can they use like mops?
I don't know. It's fine. They're going to get this bad boy clean, but I can't sit here any longer. I'm choking on dust. For Cam, Mike, we'll see you back in the